Sunday school once again, and we're going to be in the second lesson from our Proverbs study from Explore the Bible. And let's open up with a word of prayer. God, I thank you and praise you, God, for your word. God, I thank you for how incredible it is and how it speaks to our lives. And God, I just thank you for this opportunity to share this word with you, God. I pray that it would go forth, that God, it would do incredible things that your word does, God, and change people's lives, and God, help people to live their lives for you. And Lord, I just pray, Lord, as we go through this, that you help us to understand it, help it to us to apply it to our lives, God. Help us to live by it, and God, help us to dig into it, God, and come to know you more through it. God, I thank you and pray this in your Son's name. Amen. All right. Last week we did Proverbs chapter 1, verses 7 through 19. And this week we're going to be going through in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 through 12. And there's going to be some very familiar verses in there, in verses 5 and 6, which most of us know very well. But I just want to kind of give you a little bit of a brief overview of what happens between what we talked about last week and what we're going to talk about this week. We ended with verse 19 in chapter 1 last week, but verses 20 through 33 of chapter 1 is where Solomon talks about wisdom. It's like a woman calling out in public places, such as a marketplace or of a city or something like that. And the point of him saying this is to point out and show that wisdom is available if people are willing and attuned to listen to it. The wisdom is there and it's calling out. We just have to listen to it, is what he's saying there. Then Solomon goes on in chapter 2, and he uses several if-then statements there. And he's really making a case for actively pursuing wisdom. As in, you're actually trying to attain it, you're trying to get it, you're looking for it, you're studying for it, you're not just sitting back and letting it hit you as it hits you. There's several things, several results that can happen from this pursuit. One is that the searcher for wisdom grasps its true source, which is God, and he also has a right relationship with God because of that. Also, the path of wisdom then leads on to a deeper understanding of God's ways. And you also have a right relationship with God and a deeper understanding of his ways, which serve to protect the believer from the ways of evil. And what he's saying there is, first of all, in the beginning of Genesis, God creates us to have a relationship with him. Then sin comes into the picture and it distorts that relationship that we're supposed to have with him. And what we're trying to do here is through wisdom, true wisdom, the seeking of God, the fear of God, as we talked about last week, we're going to restore that right relationship with God. We're going to come to know God better, and we're also going to be able to better look out for and see the ways of the world, the evils of the world, this world that try to distract us and get us out of that right relationship with God. Now, I like the idea of an active pursuit of wisdom. You have to actually try to get it. That's why a lot of people, we as Sunday school teachers and pastors, we stress the Sunday school answers, which are pray and read your Bible. You're not going to gain wisdom about God without reading your Bible, without listening to others teach it, without you yourself digging into it and looking into it and praying to God first and foremost that He gives you understanding of it, and we have to pursue it. Now, I've often used the analogy of most of the gold that has ever been found in the world starts off with a nugget or two or a speck or two being seen above ground or in some easy place, like in a creek bed or something like that. Then most of that is quickly gathered up. But then the rest of it has to be sifted through, dug through, and mined for, and And a lot of people put their whole life's pursuit into finding gold. I know I've often talked about the Alaskan gold rush and just what people did to get there into that part of Alaska. And a lot of people died in the pursuit of it, just trying to get there. And if we pursue gold that much, how much more should we pursue this knowledge of God, this wisdom from God that gives us life so much more than a few flecks of gold ever will? I could go on about that story a lot, but we're going to leave that there. But what I'm trying to get to you here is there is an active pursuit of wisdom, and that's what Solomon is talking about here in Proverbs. Now we're going to read Proverbs chapter 3, verses 1 through 12, and then we'll dig into them and discuss them a little bit. Verse 1 says, "My son, don't forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commands, for they will bring you many days, a full life, and well-being. Never let loyalty and faithfulness leave you. Tie them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will find favor and high regard with God and people. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own understanding. In all your ways know him, and he will make your paths straight. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. For this will be healing for your body and strengthening for your bones. Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first produce of your entire harvest. Then your barns will be completely filled, and your vats will overflow with new wine. Do not despise the Lord's instructions, my son, and do not loathe his discipline. For the Lord disciplines the one he loves, just as a father disciplines the son in whom he delights." Now, looking at verse 1, it says, "My son, don't forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commands." I think right now, once again, we have the idea of a father talking to his son and trying to impart wisdom to him. And the first thing he says here is, "Don't forget my teaching." How often do we hear something good? Well, that's pretty good. Then we walk away, and 30 minutes later, we cannot remember what was said. I know a lot of times you come to church, you hear a great sermon, you hear a good sermon. And I hate to say it like this, but you go away, you go eat lunch, you go do a couple of things in the afternoon, and if somebody were to ask you what was in the sermon that morning, and you would, a lot of times we can't remember what was said there. And it's kind of like this right here. He says, "Don't forget my teaching. Don't walk away and forget this. Remember this." And to remember it, you have to really dig into it and look into it, because if you just fleetingly read it and go on, you will forget it. He says, "But let your heart keep my commands." I like that word "keep." You know, there's a lot of things that we have in our lives, things that we like to keep. There's a lot of things, other things that we just set down sometimes and we can't remember where they are. But the things that are important to us, we remember where we put them. We remember the things that we really like. You know, sometimes we lose our cell phones, sometimes we lose our wallet, sometimes we lose our keys, but we generally try to keep up with those things because they're important to us. Other things, a lot of times, we place them somewhere and we can't ever find them. I know I put something up a few weeks ago because I said, I need to put that up, I need to put it somewhere where I will remember it. But honestly, now I can't tell you where I put it. I can't find it because I don't remember where I put it. But like I said here, we need to keep these things, physically remember these things. And I like the contrast here. He's kind of got the mental aspect of do not forget my teaching, but the physical part of it is to actually keep it. And that is to do it, live it out in your lives. Now we go on to verse 2 there, and it says, "For they will bring you many days, a full life and well-being." Now, I have a question here, and this is something sometimes we take Proverbs and we think of them as promises. Now, there's been a lot of good people in this world who have followed God's word, and they have died young. So, what is that? How does that help us to look at this passage where it says, "For they will bring you many days, a full life and well-being"? Because there's a lot of people who follow God's word, and they struggle through life. But I've looked up a few things here, and I've got a little thing I'm going to read to you here. This is from Ravi Zacharias' website, rzim.org. He says, Proverbs are more general principles for life, which, if followed, aren't necessarily guaranteed to happen, but are a means of God advising certain paths of life and showing the typical likely outcomes if followed. So what he's saying here is they're not guarantees, but if you follow these things, there is a likely outcome that will come. You are more likely to have many days, a full life, and well-being. Now, if you live the ways of the world, that is not the likely outcome. Is what he's saying here. Now, a lot of people will quote, I think it's Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Well, there's been a lot of godly parents who have done a lot of godly things to train up their children in godly ways, and their children have gone and done things, the things of the world. They have gone astray and ran astray, and so that's once again an instance where we can say that this is not a guarantee, but if you do this, this is a likely outcome. But sometimes is more than likely that the child will grow up like, but sometimes they don't. Sometimes they do the things they want to do. We are humans, we have choices to make, and sometimes we choose the wrong things. Now, what he says here is, if you do these things, you are more likely to have many days, a full life, and well-being. What does he mean by a full life here? Now, like I said earlier, we were created to have a relationship with God. And when we follow this wisdom that Solomon is laying out here, we will have a full life because we are doing what we were created to do, which is to love and serve God. And the well-being thing there, King James translates that as peace, and other translations translate that peace and prosperity. Well, the word there for well-being is the word shalom, and that's the Hebrew word there. You hear a lot of people say is kind of in a parting saying, shalom, like peace, go and be well. But what that word shalom there, it means is more than peace, and I've said this many times too. Peace is more than a lack or absence of conflict. Peace is a state of being in your life where you are so in tune with God that you don't let the things of the world worry you. You know that God has everything in control. You know that living for Him and following Him is the best thing for you in your life. So you don't worry about all the other things in your life. You let God take care of that, and you love and serve Him and reach out to others and love them in the process. And in doing that, it means all of your life is complete and made whole because you are serving and loving God like you were meant to do. And that is going to go a long way in this chapter, in these verses here, and we'll see that a little bit later also. Going on to verse 3, never let loyalty and faithfulness leave you. Tie them around your neck and write them on the tablet of your heart. Now that word loyalty there is a huge word in Hebrew. It is the word hesed. This word is difficult to translate into English because it means so much. And you actually have to translate it with several English words. It combines the aspects of selfless love, kindness, mercy, grace, steadfastness, endurance, and loyalty. And a lot of people will say that it is the glue of God's covenant relationship, which means God is merciful and loving toward us, and He is steadfast, He is faithful, and all these things. And therefore, He will not go back on His promises. When He promises you something, it will come true. And the idea here is we need to never let this hesed, this love, this mercy, this loyalty, this faithfulness never leave us. We need to have this, we need to bind it around our neck so that it goes with us everywhere that we go. The idea of faithfulness there, it emphasizes the idea of certainty, truth, dependability. We can depend on God. We know that it is the truth. We can be certain about it. In this term, it is a central characteristic of who God is. God is truth. God is faithful, and He is dependable. And we can be certain God never changes. And then you tie these things around your neck. You believe them internally and you live them out externally. And when you bind them, like I said, you carry them everywhere you go. You show them to you, because when it's around your neck, it is evident. That's the idea of how you live. And when he says there to write it on your heart, that word write means to inscribe or to cut into it. Because back then they had tablets and things like that. You actually had to make a mark in it. And that's kind of the idea here. Let these words, this wisdom make a mark on your life. Let it be visible and evident to everybody around you. Going on to verse 4, it says, then you will find favor and high regard with God's people. The goal of this wisdom was to ensure right relationships from the people hearing it. The first right relationship, like I said earlier, is that with God. We were created for this, and when we search for wisdom and we find it in the right place, which is God, we have that right relationship with Him. And when we have this right relationship with God, we also have a right relationship with those we are around, those who we go to church with, those our neighbors, those who we hang out with, those who we meet in the grocery stores, in the streets, and wherever else we go. And a person cannot fully live in harmony with others if that person does not live in harmony with God. Think about that for a second. If you want to live in harmony with others, you first of all have to live in harmony with God. And that is so true in our world today. And in the many circumstances that are going on around here, if we were to seek God first, pursue God first, it would solve a lot of our issues. Going on to verse 5. Now, this one is one you've heard a lot. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not rely on your own understanding. We come to this word trust. And this word here is it's a neat word. It's a deep word. And I used this illustration about a year or two ago in a sermon. I used it in another Bible study that I did on the book of Proverbs. But there's a guy who, back late 1800s, early 1900s, somewhere around in there, he was doing a tightrope across Niagara Falls. And he was going back and forth on it, doing all this sort of stuff. Everybody's watching from the edges, and they're amazed and wowed and everything. Well, then he grabs a wheelbarrow, and he puts the wheelbarrow out there, and he pushes the wheelbarrow across, and he pushes it back. And he comes back, and he says, does anybody think I can do this with somebody in it? And a lot of people look at him and say, well, yeah, probably you can. And then the guy, I forget his name, but he said, well, somebody get in and we'll do it. Now, to get in that wheelbarrow, that would be the absolute idea of trust. You would have to trust that that guy could get you across there and back. Now, the idea of this with God is not so daunting as that. But we can get in the wheelbarrow of life, so to say, and go across the tightrope of the world, and we can know that God has us in His hands, and He will not let us fall. He will take care of us. He will provide for us. He will protect us. Well, we might fall, but God will always be there for us. And what I mean by that is we go through life. He does not guarantee us that nothing will ever happen to us in life. He's in John 16:33, Jesus says, you will have troubles in this life, but be of good cheer because I have overcome the world. And what he's saying is there, you will have troubles, but know this, that I have you in my hands and you will make it through it. And you can trust me for that. And that's what God is saying here. You can go through this world, and yes, you will have speed bumps, you will have pits that you will fall into, and this and that and the other. But don't worry about all that, because I have got you through the whole way. So many times the gospel is presented as become a Christian and all the good things, nothing bad will ever happen to you again. And that is so much of a distortion of the gospel. And that leads a lot of people to actually run away from the gospel at some point, because they say, okay, well, that sounds great. I will say this prayer for you, and I'll say this prayer. And yeah, now everything's supposed to go great in my life. Well, then a week or two later, something really bad happens, and they say, well, this God stuff, there's nothing to it because this isn't supposed to happen. Well, that's not the way it is. you will have bad things happen to you in your life. And we need to tell people this when we share the gospel with them. But the difference is, through those bad times, I have hope and joy and peace because I know my God. And I know that He has me in His hands, and He has the best things in mind for me in my life. And yes, there will be hard times, but He has me through it all. Now, that is a lot to say about the word trust, but we could actually say even more than that, but we better get going if we want to get through this. And he says, trust in the Lord with all. That three-letter word there, it has a tremendous meaning on this verse. We like to do half. We like to do part. I'll give you 10% of my heart this week. We'll see how it works, and if that works out well, then I might give you 20. But a lot of times we're never truly willing to give all of our hearts to God. We always hold back. And when we hold back, we are holding back, and that causes us a lot of grief. It causes us a lot of worry, anxiety, and other things. But we have to trust the Lord with all of our heart. And the idea of the heart in Hebrew is every sense of your being. It was where all your emotions were, all your just all of who you are was involved in your heart. And you have to give that all to God. And then notice what he says after that. Do not rely on your own understanding. Now, this is what we like to do. We like to do about 40 to 50% of the first part of this, of trusting God. And the rest of it, we like to rely on our own understanding. Once I feel like I can handle this. The times where I cannot handle it, then I will trust God for it. That is so backwards of what this is saying to us. In everything, in all things, we need to rely on God and not on our own understanding. I'm going to tell you something. There's a lot of things that I thought I've understood at one time in my life that I realize now that I don't understand. And a lot of things that I thought I knew, that got me in trouble when I tried to rely on that. And not just, you think you know how to fix something sometimes, so you try to do it, and then you realize that didn't work. And then you end up sometimes spending a whole lot more money because then you have to take it to somebody who really does know how to fix something. And that's kind of the same thing with God here. A lot of times we try to do things on our own and we make such a big mess of it, and then we have to go to God with it. And if we'd have just done that in the first place, it would have been so much easier. And we had a lot less scars to show for it sometimes too. But trust in the Lord with all of your heart. And now, those words and these verses 5 and 6 are so much a part of what we should do as Christians. It's just not, we just don't grasp it. If we would take these words to heart and truly do this, it would be a lot less grief for us. Like I said, it doesn't mean bad things won't happen, but we will have the faith and trust and hope in God when they do. Going on to verse 6, in all your ways know Him. Now this is the CSB version, the Christian Standard Bible, and most versions say in all your ways acknowledge Him, but I like how it says this, to know Him. Know that God has you. Know that you can trust God for this. Know where your hope is. Know where His love is. Know that He is faithful. Know that He is good. I really like that because you can fill in all those different attributes of God and who He is in that sentence right there. And then look what is in the idea of ways. That right there is an analogy or symbolism of people's lifestyles. In your entire lifestyle, in everything that you do, in everything way that you live, act, interact, in all of these things, know Him. In your relationships at church, where we put on our Christian face when we walk into church, and yeah, we act like we're Christians, but not only that, when we walk out those doors, when we go in the grocery store, when we go and we talk with somebody in a dispute that we have, even in those times, we need to know Him. We need to act like we know Him. We need to let that drive our being, drive how we act, what we do. When we drive, how we act online, what we look at online, how we act at home when nobody else is around, in everything that we do. And it says, and He will make your paths straight. Now, there's a lot, we live here in the in the North Georgia mountains, there are a lot of crooked roads around here. But he will make these roads straight. And back then, that was an analogy for living the right way. Keep your life on the straight and narrow, which we still say today. But you didn't want to wander to the left or to the right. You didn't want to wander off the road, wander off the path. And he will make that path straight for you because you will be knowing him and following him. Going on to verse 7. Don't be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Now, I like how this verse says this. First of all, he says, don't be wise in your own eyes. Hebrew poetry has a lot of parallels in it. They say one thing, but then they match it up with another thing. And a lot of times they contrast in these things. And right here you see that contrast. Being wise in your own eyes, what they're saying here is sort of the opposite of fearing the Lord and turning away from evil. So doing what is wise in your own eyes is the opposite of fearing God. Think about that for a second. A lot of times I've done what I thought was right, only later on to think that wasn't so right because I was doing what I wanted to do, and a lot of times I was being rebellious when I did that. So being wise in your own eyes, thinking the way of the world, thinking the way you do things, listening to the ways of the world and the wisdom, supposed wisdom of the world, is the opposite of fearing God. Like I said last week, you look in the first couple of chapters of Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, and the wisdom of the world was that the cross is the ultimate idea of punishment. But the wisdom of God was that I'm going to take that cross and I'm going to use that cross to punish my son for your sins, and then turn the idea of the world of that as being the ultimate symbol of punishment. And I'm going to turn that into the ultimate symbol of hope, which he did. Now we look at a cross. We have crosses on our steeple. We have crosses in our baptistry. So a lot of people hang crosses around your neck. I bet you if people back in the days of the Romans saw you with a cross hanging around your neck, they would think you were nuts, because that is the ultimate symbol of death and persecution back then. But now, for us, it is the ultimate symbol of hope. So these two things are opposites. We need to stop doing what we think is right and fear God and follow his commands and his wisdom. Going on to verse 8. This will be healing for your body and strengthening for your bones. Now, you remember how I said at the beginning of this that we were created to have a relationship with God. Our bodies are tuned, are made to do that. And when we do that, we are doing what we're supposed to do. And when we are serving God, loving God, trusting God, we will have a lot less anxiety, a lot less worries, a lot less sadness, a lot less hopelessness. And when you have joy and hope and peace in your life, a lot of these things that sometimes plague you will go away or not be so evident that they bring you down, so to say. And this will be strengthening to your bones. This is what the Bible says here. I mean, he's saying, don't be wise in your own eyes, fear of the Lord, turn away from evil, and this will be healing for your body and strengthening for your bones. I have seen people who were incredibly involved in sin, and it really affected their whole being. It affected their health, and it affected a lot of other parts of their mental makeup and other things. And when they turned away from those things and became right with God, all of those other ailments went away, and they became perfectly good, healthy, loving people. And just saying that does work. And like it says here, it brings healing to your body and strengthening to your bones. Going on now to verse 9. Honor the Lord with your possessions and with the first produce of your entire harvest. Now, the first thing it says there is honor. Now, in Hebrew, that means to be heavy or weighty. And what that means is you place a lot of weight on what God says. You will place a lot of weight on doing what he says. You honor him with these things. And you honor him with your possessions. All you have is from God anyway. It's not yours. It's not, you see little kids, it's mine, mine, mine. Well, a lot of times we as adults, we do that too. And what he's saying here is honor God with those possessions. Don't let them rule your life. Let God rule your life and use those things as instruments and as equipment, so to say, that God has allowed you to do what he wants you to do. And then you go on, and with the first produce of your entire harvest. Now, what that is there is that's what we call tithing. When you give 10% of what you earn to God, that is what God has asked us to do, because it is all his in the first place. We're supposed to honor him with it. You go on to verse 10 there. It says, then your barns will be completely filled and your vats will overflow with new wine. Now, I just want to tell you, in my own life, there's been times when I have tithed to God, and there's been times when I have not tithed to God. And I'll tell you this, in the times when I don't tithe to God, I am keeping more money for myself. But you know what amazingly happens? It seems like I have less money during those times. And when I do tithe and give God, 10% or my tithe, or sometimes a little bit more than that, it's amazing. I give my money away, but in truth, it seems like I have more. And I can't explain to you how that happens. All I can say is that God is blessing what we are doing when we do that. And that's why he can say there, your barns will be completely filled and your vats will overflow with new wine. Try it out. In Malachi, he says, tithe and see what happens when you do. Give cheerfully to God. Try it out. See. When you give, and it's not only your money, it is your time, it is your talents, it is your abilities, it is everything about you. Give God part of it. It is his in the first place, and he will honor and bless you because of that. Now, I'm not preaching no prosperity gospel here, that you can do this and you're going to be driving this nice fancy new car next week. So that's not what I'm saying. You will have what you need and plenty of it when you honor him with your first fruits. Now, going on here to verse 11, do not despise the Lord's instruction, my son, and do not loathe his discipline. Now, we look here at the instruction and discipline. These things, when we look at these things, this is not God being angry with us or being impatient with us, but this is an act of love. And as a parent, you see this. You don't let your children do everything that they want to do. You discipline them. You show them the right way. You show them that when you do certain things, there are consequences for that. This is an act of love so that they don't go out doing what they want to and doing what is wise in their own eyes and getting themselves in trouble. In the next few chapters of Proverbs, we're going to see where doing what you want to do and chasing after the things of the world will bring you to destruction. And we'll see that, like I said, coming up. But the instruction and discipline are actually God's mercy. It is his mercy. He is not letting us do what we want to. He is trying to turn us back to his paths, onto that straight path, which leads us to where we need to be, which is with God. And so, think about this, though. I had somebody tell me this one time. Discipline is mercy. You may think of that. That's not true, especially if you're the one being disciplined. Sometimes that's hard to see. And like I said, it's got to be adequate discipline, not brutal anger discipline. It is rightly applied discipline. But discipline is mercy. These two words, instruction and discipline, describe God's activity which he is designed to confront and change sinful behavior. He's trying to get us to see the error of our ways and help us to see that following him is the best way for our lives. And he tells us not to despise or loathe this. That is what fools do. When we despise, and I'm just going to tell you, it is hard for me, it's hard for a lot of people to take instruction. it's something I have to work on. It's something that's it's what I do sometimes. But it's a sign of pride for one thing. When you can't listen, you can't take instruction from somebody else. That is a sign of pride, and God is opposed to those who are prideful. But what he's trying to do here is he's trying to show us the right way. And a lot of times we think we're wise in our own eyes. You can see how all this ties together, and so we despise it or loathe it, and we go do our things our own way, and we end up in a bunch of trouble, and then we wonder why this happened. Well, God told us so. Okay. Going on to verse 12, it says, "For the Lord disciplines the ones he loves, the one he loves, just as a father disciplines a son in whom he delights." God disciplines us because he loves us. And it's hard for us to see when we're the one being disciplined. But if we would see this and truly see that he has the best intentions for us, then it's much easier to take this. And a lot of times we have to do this thing called humbling ourselves to realize this. We have to come to realize that we are not the one in control here, that we are not the one who needs to be happy all the time. We are not the one who needs to go and do what we want to do. And, we need to see that God has his best intentions for us. And he says that the Father is the one in whom he delights. That means the one who he is pleased with. And we need to learn to accept that and live by that. And like I said earlier, this whole idea of peace and shalom and all this, that is when we are following God like he intended us to do it. That is when we will find the most joy and happiness and peace in our lives. And we all are searching for hope. We're all searching for peace. We're all searching for joy and all these things. And we search for them all around the world, and all these things that we want, and this new thing that we have here, or this new car that I bought, or this new whatever I got, this new hobby that I'm picking up, this new place I want to move to, this new relationship that I'm in, this new job that I've got, this bank account which is now growing to what I think it should be, which is never enough. We've tried to find that happiness and peace and joy in all those things, but it only brings us more discontentment. It brings us wanting more. This is something, sin never satisfies you. You always want more. So that is why chasing after the things of the world is senseless. That's why Solomon says in Ecclesiastes, I've chased after all these things, and it is nothing but vanity, emptiness. And that's where he comes to the idea in chapter 12 of Ecclesiastes, fear the Lord. And this all ties together, and I can sit here and I can tell you all this, but a lot of times I have to learn this in my own life too. I'm talking to myself as much as I'm talking to anybody who's listening to this. I have to be content with where I'm at, and I have to turn my life and devote my life to God and seek him. And that's when I find peace. That's when I find joy. Not in someone else's eyes, but in God's eyes. Let's close in prayer. Lord, I thank you and I love you. God, and I just pray, Lord, that you would help me to hear the words of this passage this morning. Help me to hear these things, to understand them, God. Help me to tie them around my neck. Help me to take them and know them inwardly. Help me to actively pursue these things, to seek this wisdom and this knowledge. And God, help me to live this out in my life. God, help me to find my joy and peace in you. Help me to trust you and not rely upon my own ways, not be wise in my own eyes. God, help me rely on you in everything that I do. Help me to give what is yours of my possessions to you, God. Help me to honor you with these things, God. Help me to live these things for you. Help me to take your discipline, God, and love it and live it. And God, see that it is beneficial, that it is your mercy toward me, Lord. Lord, I pray this for myself, and I pray this for everyone who is listening this morning. Lord, I pray this in your Son's name. Amen.